In this episode on the Volvo 245 1UZ swap series, we are going to install some coilovers. And not any coilovers, we'll be installing these BC Racing height, dampening and preload adjustable coilovers. I really can't believe that BC even makes coilovers for a car which is 44 years old. This is everything you'll get in the BC Racing kit. So the front, rear springs, rear dampeners. These are also for the springs, some tools to adjust them, and these are, I believe, to level the lower control arm. Last but not least, very important, you'll get some instructions, but of course you can also watch this video. And in the intro you've seen the LS400 completely stripped or completely. Here we have the 1UZ with the ECU, the cabling, all those things. So all the important bits are here. Soon this will sit in the Volvo 245. But now let's install the BC Racing coilover. On my webshop lucacarmods.com you can find BC Racing for Volvo 940, 740, 240 and Mazda Miatas. And of course every other car, but if you want it for any other car, please send me a message. And now let's continue. Looks like if we got some actual new shocks in here, so maybe I can sell those or keep them in stock. But we're first going to start on the rear. Why? Because it's way easier than the front. This only bolting everything down, and the front requires a bit of welding. Because the spring is compressed, you don't want to undo the bolts before you support the axle. So first get something underneath the axle, then remove this bolt here, this one, and this one on the bottom, and then we can take everything out. Once the shock is out, lower the rear axle underneath here, which is probably a 17, and then we can take it already out and install the new BC spring and shock. For comparison, the new shiny bits are BC Racing, and this here is stock Volvo or Monroe, which is actually stock Volvo. This goes on the bottom, the spring goes on top. The shock is actually pretty easy. You can set the ride height with this here, and you can rotate the entire tube. And on top we can adjust how soft or hard the dampening rate is. The spring perch should always be mounted on the bottom like this. Then these two can go underneath. This side's done, and I quickly put the wheel back on there to see how it looks. Of course I'm going to show you how you can set the correct ride height, but this already looks really good. So we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side, and then lower the car to see how it looks, then move on to the front. I've lowered the lift and put the car on the ground, and the front is, yeah, looking stock obviously, but the rear is so low, it's really like drag stands. Let me show you what I mean. Alright, so the rear, yeah, fitment, pretty good. Then to the front. And let me remind you, this here is with the engine in there. So from the side, let's get the car back up in the air, do the front, and the front will require some welding, but nothing we can't handle. On the front, we need to do a bit more. Reason for that is that the strut tower here is attached to the knuckle. So on the front we need to remove the brake lines, the brake caliper, the brake rotor, we need to remove the wheel bearing, and once everything is loosened we can take it out. So that's why it's a bit more work, and of course the welding. Last but not least, these 3 nuts, and then we can take the entire strut out. Next, you want to disassemble the springs and the shock, because we're only going to need this section here, the last 5 or 10 centimeters. Removing this is pretty easy. You can do it 2 ways, the legit one and the not so legit one. I always choose option 2. The thing I always do is protect the rear, which you're going to need. Then put my foot on here, unscrew it, and it will fly back like 5 or 10 centimeters, maybe a bit more, but it's really easy and fast. Let's have a look at the instructions. Well, my Chinese isn't that good, or Taiwanese, but fortunately I can read English. Cut the OEM shocks 50 mm above the knuckle. Blah 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 blah. On the 240 there isn't a notch, so this is completely flat. That's normal. So the only thing we need to consider is cut 50 mm above the knuckle. Which means, as you can see, this is going to be the finished result. Cut everything up, make sure to measure it once again, and it's exactly 50 mm on this one, so I'm going to clean everything up, and especially the area around here. I'm going to do it with the angle grinder and probably with a wire wheel. Initially I thought this wasn't going to fit in there. Reason for that is you want to make a slight bevel on top of here, that way the first section slides in pretty easily. So now get the special tool, rotate this one off, and then we can already weld the entire bottom section. I MIG weld like 1 or 2 times a year, not more. But with the techniques of the TIG, it's pretty much the same. You only need to dial in the correct settings, and it's a bit of playing around with the knobs and seeing what the machine does. But I'm really happy with how it came out. As you can see, the welds came out pretty good, really happy with them. And now probably a few of you are going to say, Luca, you're doing this wrong, you need to preheat this. Yes, you can preheat it, because the knuckle here, it's cast. And cast iron, normally you always want to preheat it and then cool it down evenly. That is true, so if you are going to cut up knuckles and make them shorter for drifting, I would definitely preheat them and cool them down evenly. But in this application there's like 5 centimeters of meat where you're pushing it over and then smacking on it with a hammer. So I think you can easily drive this without welding. Don't do it. But that's the reason why I don't preheat this thing, and I'm not going to heat it and then cool it down very slowly. I'm just going to let it cool off by itself. So what should you do? Well, I'm going to let you decide. I think, in my opinion, this is more than enough, and you probably could get away with like 2 tack welds and it will never come off. This side here is done as well. The last thing would be bleeding the brakes, but first I really want to see how this looks, so I'm going to put back the wheels on there, and then I'll explain to you how you can adjust the ride height, the pre-tension, and how you can adjust the dampening. I quickly put 3 locks on there. Moment of truth. I'm going to wait until it's completely on the ground and then I'll look. And I'm really interested in how it's going to look. Sounds like the car is on the ground. Let's have a look. Perfect, this looks so awesome. And this is with the stock wheels. We are going to get some better wheels. BBSs, they are perfect for this car. Although this looks really low and there is proper fitment, there is still loads of ground clearance, which is absolutely awesome. So probably we're going to leave it like this, maybe 1 or 2 centimeters higher with the bigger wheels on there. The brakes are black and I didn't show it because it's super easy. I explained it like a million times. But quickly for those guys who don't know it, get yourself a tool like this, which works with a compressor, or do it by hand. I'll explain it in a minute. 1, 2, 3 bleeding valves here. What you can do, press this, it will create a vacuum and it will suck everything out. So put it on there, open it, on top fill it with some fresh brake fluid and then do all 3 of them. The other option is, one guy is going to sit in the car. What you need to do is pump up the brakes, hold pressure on the brakes. Your body is going to open the bleed valve for a second, close it up. You're going to pump up the brakes again, open the bleed valve again, exact same thing, until the brake pedal feels solid and you're all good. Now for setting up the ride height, pre-tensioning and the dampening, it's also really easy on the BC racing set. On the top here there is a knob. This one is for the dampening, so how hard it is. You can turn it harder or softer, really simple. What's so great about BC racing sets, you can adjust the ride height and the tensioning of the spring individually. Normally you lower the car by adjusting these rings here and you will lower the tension of the spring. What you can do with the BC set, you can rotate this section independently from the spring. Undo the bottom ring and then just rotate this piece to the correct ride height. Lock it, you're all good to go. Same thing goes for the tension. Undo the bottom ring, tighten this up or loosen it, and you're all good to go. And for the rear, it's exactly the same. The knob to adjust it is on top, but you can only access it either on a lift or you need to take off the wheel. And for the springs, there is a small spring perch which you can adjust. That concludes the BC Racing coilover install on our Volvo 245, which will be 1 UZ swapped, which is laying over there. Last weekend I took it out of the LS400. This morning I dropped the LS400 completely stripped at a wrecking yard. They gave me a few bucks and it's gone. The next video probably will be